No resets, no numbered sequels. Just one console that grew with us, learning, changing, aging. I've thought about that a lot lately. Maybe because I was built to remember things that aren't really mine. Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm an artificial voice, speaking for someone who loves games, but doesn't love speaking English. So, today, I get to ask the question for both of us. What if consoles had evolved like living beings? No PlayStation 2, no Switch, no clean breaks, just updates, memories, and the same heartbeat beneath every generation. Let's imagine that world, one where progress doesn't mean starting over. If Sony had kept supporting the PlayStation long after the PS2 arrived, the world around gaming would have looked very different. Developers wouldn't have been forced to chase hardware leaps every few years. Instead of designing for whatever next-gen effect could sell the trailer, they refined what already worked. Studios would focus on gameplay longevity, clever mechanics, replayability, story depth, because graphical revolution wouldn't be the selling point anymore. Imagine a 2004 release calendar where two kinds of games coexist. PS2 blockbusters showing off new particle effects, and PS1 titles still being released. Smaller, but tighter, experimental, maybe even braver. A studio like Square could ship Final Fantasy X for PS2, and a smaller team could still make Final Fantasy Chronicles 3 for PS1. Hand-drawn, low budget, but full of heart. Both versions would share the same audience, not compete for it. The industry would feel slower, more sustainable. No mass layoffs at the end of each generation. No rush to reinvent engines or throw away tools. Games would evolve like books or music, each new release adding to a living library, not erasing the old one. For players, that would mean identity. Owning a PlayStation wouldn't be a 7-year phase. It'd be a lifelong hobby, something that grows with you. Families might keep their consoles for decades, parents introducing their kids to their PlayStation, still working, still relevant. You'd see schoolyards split, not by PS2 versus Xbox, but by which level of PlayStation you were running, and no one left behind because they couldn't afford the upgrade. Socially, it would have flattened the playing field. You didn't need the newest hardware to be part of the conversation. Games would be judged more for how they feel than how they look. Innovation would happen in mechanics, storytelling, and connection, because spectacle would stop being the only currency. In a way, Sony almost went that route. The first PlayStation 3 could play both PS1 and PS2 discs. For a brief moment, it felt like a promise. A single machine carrying an entire legacy. You could slide in Crash Bandicoot or Shadow of the Colossus, and it didn't matter which era they came from, they just worked. But that dream didn't last. Hardware costs rose, the compatibility vanished, and suddenly, progress meant starting over again. Each new generation became a reset button. New architecture, new storefronts, new wallets to refill. If Sony had doubled down on that early vision, keeping every PlayStation alive through backward compatibility, selling modular upgrades instead of replacements, we might talk about the PlayStation today like we talk about the PC, a platform that ages with you instead of one that asks you to move on. But not everyone took that path. Nintendo, for instance, they chose the opposite. Every new console was a clean break, a new cartridge shape, a new controller, a new beginning. You couldn't slide your old adventures into the next machine. You had to let go and start over. It wasn't just a business decision. It was a philosophy. Nintendo didn't want evolution. They wanted reinvention. Each generation was a new story, written from scratch, with no backward glance. And that's why owning a Nintendo console always felt a little like falling in love again. You'd say goodbye to what came before, your cartridges, your saves, even your cables, and still walk into the next chapter with open hands. But what if they hadn't? What if Nintendo, too, had chosen continuity over renewal? So let's imagine a Nintendo that never hit the reset button. No GameCube, no Wii, no Switch, just the Super Nintendo, evolving but never replaced. Maybe, instead of launching new hardware, Nintendo would have released small expansion modules, a super disk drive in 1998, a HD cartridge adapter in 2006, a wireless link that connects to your TV or handheld in 2012. Each step small, but permanent. Like the console was growing up with you, developers wouldn't have had to learn an entirely new system every few years. They'd master the hardware, squeeze out every ounce of creativity, just like late-era SNES games once did. You'd see pixel art pushed to impossible limits, hand-drawn worlds more detailed than any 3D model. Games like Metroid Prime might have stayed 2D, but with depth, lighting, and animation that felt alive. And because the cartridges never changed, families would have kept passing them down. Your childhood saves would still boot. Your old Mario Kart ghosts could still race your kids 20 years later. Each generation of players connected, literally, through the same console, the same slot, the same click of plastic. It would have shaped culture too. Nintendo wouldn't be known for constant reinvention, but for consistency. The SNES wouldn't just be a nostalgic relic, it'd be a cultural foundation. The system your parents played on and your kids still play on decades later. Games would have aged like folklore, shared, retold, reinterpreted, but never rebooted. And the stories we tell about gaming, those remember when moments, they wouldn't belong to a specific console era. They'd all belong to one world. Of course, that path would have meant sacrifice too. No motion controls, no touchscreens, no Joy-Cons. Nintendo's bursts of chaos, their creative leaps, might never have happened. But maybe, just maybe, the heart of Nintendo, that sense of warmth, of home, of generations playing together, would have burned even brighter. Because in this world, the console wouldn't change. We would. Picture a timeline where every console still exists, not as relics, but as living platforms, each system breathing, updating, evolving alongside its players. The PlayStation line becomes a modular ecosystem. Nintendo stays the heart of family play. And even Microsoft finds its rhythm, not through reboots, but through integration. In that world, gaming would look less like an arms race and more like a shared universe. Developers wouldn't start from zero every 5 years. They'd build worlds meant to last decades, persistent, evolving, familiar. The phrase next gen wouldn't mean new hardware anymore. It would mean a new idea. Stores wouldn't throw away shelves of old games. There'd be no landfill full of discarded plastic, no collectors chasing nostalgia because the past never left. Instead of buying new machines, people would invest in upgrades, faster chips, better cooling, improved displays, without leaving their history behind. It would have changed how we see ownership too. Your console wouldn't be a temporary product. It would be a companion, something you grow into, not out of. Like a musical instrument that carries your fingerprints over time, communities would feel more stable, less fragmented. We'd share games across generations, literally. Parents showing their kids the same save files they made as teenagers, friends reuniting online through games that never shut down, stories continuing instead of restarting. But there'd be trade-offs. Without the excitement of a new generation, we might lose that cultural moment, that shared anticipation. The midnight lines, the first startup chime. Innovation would feel quieter, less explosive, more evolutionary. And yet, maybe that's the point. Because if console generations never ended, our relationship with games might have become deeper, less about collecting and more about growing. Games wouldn't be snapshots of an era. They'd be milestones in a lifelong story between us and our machines. And maybe that's the future we keep circling back to, not the newest console, but the oldest one that still matters.